Well, for me, it's really just tools. It's, I don't care about stuff that's new. Like, as if it's just technology, then it's like a trade show. It says no, it's like, so sometimes I get very, excited by new systems, but I try to remember they're just pencils, they're not really, I don't worship it. I really don't. I like it a lot. I have the same problem with it that everybody does. Love and hate, it's nice to do certain things like have a powerful GPS program, and then it's also, it's horrible that you can't get lost anymore. There's no way to get lost. So you give up a lot of things when you have fast, sharp tools. Metaphor. I never thought of that. I guess a ventriloquist dummy. A ventriloquist dummy, like these kind of people talk like that. You have a dummy that says things that you are not going to say. Maybe, but I was never very good at ventriloquism, as you can see. So, also the violin is like a kind of, sidekick. So I can see the things that are informational, and the violin can cry. It's interesting to talk about countries, and it's great to see these sort of ideas floated about countries. But really, for myself, and I am on an urban circuit. I think of myself as you say, from New York. When I'm on tour, I don't say I'm going to Germany. I say I'm going to Berlin. I don't say I'm going to Italy. I say I'm going to Venice. I'm on the circuit of cities is the cultural path in many ways. And for example, I have more in common with people here in Venice than I do with people in Tallahassee, Florida, for sure. Yeah. We don't have the same language, but the mentality is more like that. So I think it would be very interesting if artists and cultural institutions recognize that it really is an urban world in that way, and that we connect our cities culturally. Well, I think the biggest change is that there are just so many artists now. It's just, there are 10 times the number of artists. So the scene is much more diversified, and it's much bigger. So it gives it a different, and also it has much more to do with money now. And a friend of mine said, I'm not part of the art world, I'm part of the art market. And I thought, wow. When we were starting, money had nothing to do with it. We just wouldn't do it for that reason, So now it has a lot of those. It's much more stylish thing, and it has to do with art is often treated like money, traded like it, invested in it, and so on. So that's a difference, and every couple of years the scene shifts a lot. So and that's an interesting and nice thing about the art scene. It doesn't really, it's never stable. So. It's no easier. I still have exactly the same problems, exactly the same insecurities that I did as a young artist. Exactly. Plus, I don't think of myself in a public way ever. I never read anything that's written about me. I don't. I try not to have this kind of thing. I try just to keep my eyes open and see. But I also never felt that I finished anything, really. So I have a constant sort of sense of disappointment, I have to say. Like I would just stop working on something because I couldn't figure out how to fix it, you know. Maybe it's a trick that makes you keep working, a psychological trick that you play on yourself, but I don't know. First of all, I was from a very large family, so 8 kids, so it was like a mess all the time. One thing I remember was a girl named Lucy, and she was had Down syndrome. I would always see her on the way to school, and she would be looking at a leaf. She was a very sweet girl. Oh, she was so sweet. And then 6 hours later, I would come home from school, and she was still looking at the leaf. And I thought, oh, this is I would like to be her friend. So we were sort of friends, and I remember that very well. You know how much I liked her, because she was just. She wasn't like the other kids. She could look at a leaf for 6 hours, and she had a kind of sweetness that, you know, kids can be cruel, and she was not. She was just like, and it was like meeting a little deer in the forest or something. So I remember her. That's one thing I remember very well, Lucy. So anyway, nobody knows why we dream. Nobody knows at all. It's just that the mind is like, in a way, it's easier if you don't shut it off, so it keeps humming and producing images and thoughts, and they're just random. Is it like this? Is it Freudian, that they have some meaning that if you could just talk about them enough, you could find the meaning? I think they're useful in a sense so that it reminds you that so much of your waking life is a mental construction as well. We are much more clever than the words we use, and we all know this, and we all know the compromises that we make when we try to express things, and how they fall short of what it really feels like to be here, try to be a human, you know, and then when you, I mean, of course, there are great poets who can describe this really well, but sometimes in the middle of explaining something, or you know, I just think, you know what, it's just better to stop. Mm-hmm. Just stop for a moment, and it's also language as a defense against things. You know, when you're at a dinner table and everyone stops talking, and it's like so awkward, and you know, then you just start babbling just some ridiculous things just to fill the air. Language does a lot of other things other than just create meaning, or what we call meaning. Millions of other types of things that it does. And so when I like to see it break down, and when it breaks down, I like to see how what's going on with it. He's a wonderful editor, for example, and also he's not so interested in metaphor. If I'm using metaphor in a certain way, he'll just go, "Why don't you just say what you mean? Why are you comparing it to another thing?" I was saying, well, poetry, metaphor, comparison. You know, I say, no, why don't you just say that instead of allude to it? And it's a very good impulse, and he's a very you know, intuitive writer, and he's a very blunt writer. And he's not, and that makes it very exciting to read his lyrics. He's not he's not decorative. He's really trying to say this and things. So it's a very different approach than I have. So you know, I really like to. I mean, we don't really collaborate unless we're just doing improvisation in terms of music, and then we do sometimes. But I would rather have a husband than a collaborator, let's say. So We don't really, maybe okay, he'll comment, but we don't go, what should we make? We might kill each other.